But you lied when you said you knew Roger and me.
And you lied when you said we'd come to your banquet, too.
If we showed up now, we'd just be trying to make your lie good. You can't make a foul ball fair by moving the baseline. It's just not in the rules.
More than that, Hutch. It'd mean we were lying to
Roger Maris. Here's the windup. Fastball hit deep to right. This could be it. Way back there. Holy cow! Another standing ovation for Roger Maris. 61 home runs, and they're still fighting for that ball out there. People were climbing over each other's backs.
When Roger Maris chased down Babe Ruth's sacred record in 1961, the entire baseball world wanted him to fail. The greatest individual achievement in sports history was happening, and the overwhelming sentiment was hostility. The press hounded him in the streets like he had committed a crime. The commissioner created a rule mid-season to protect Ruth's ghost. Fans sent him hate mail by the thousands calling him unworthy, a fraud, telling him he had no right to touch the Babe's legacy. His hair fell out in clumps from the stress. Even baseball legends who had played at the highest level openly said he did not deserve to break the most famous record in sports. Rogers Hornsby, a career .358 hitter, went on record saying Maris was not the right man for this moment. The narrative that summer was clear. Roger Maris was the wrong guy at the wrong time chasing the wrong dream. He was an outsider from North Dakota who did not fit the mold of a New York Yankee hero. He was not flashy like Mickey Mantle. He was not charming with the press. He was quiet, private, uncomfortable with the spotlight burning through him every day. But here is what the media and fans and historians did not understand. The guys who actually faced him on the field, the elite pitchers who threw strikes to him, and base runners who tested his arm in right field, they were not talking about asterisks or worthiness, or whether he fit some imaginary standard. They were talking about survival. They were describing a hitter who was truly built different, a player whose presence in the batter's box created a clinical, almost scientific terror that no amount of public hate could erase. So what did those legends see that everyone else missed? What made Roger Maris so terrifying that Hall of Fame pitchers admitted they were glad they did not have to face him every day? The answer is not just in the 61 home runs. It is in the 10 specific ways he systematically broke the will of the best players in baseball. And if you are enjoying this story and want more deep dives into the legends who lived this game, make sure to give hype to this video. It helps us keep bringing you these stories. Now let's work our way down through the nightmare that was facing Roger Maris. Number 10. The Old Guard Panic. Rogers Hornsby and the Generational Meltdown. Rogers Hornsby was one of the most abrasive figures in baseball history. A career .358 hitter who never met a compliment he could not turn into an insult. So difficult that he cycled through teams despite his talent, because nobody could stand working with him. But Hornsby was also a legend, and when Maris started chasing Ruth's record, Hornsby was publicly terrified for the sake of the game itself. He went on record saying Maris was not worthy of breaking the record, that the new game with livelier balls and shorter fences was erasing the achievements of the past, that the history books were being rewritten by inferior players benefiting from easier conditions. This was genuine generational fear. The idea that a loner from North Dakota, a guy who did not play by the social rules of the New York media, could rewrite baseball history was more than Hornsby could handle. For Hornsby and the Old Guard, Maris represented a threat to the natural order. Baseball belonged to certain kinds of players, charismatic players who understood their place in the mythology. Maris was none of those things. He was straightforward, blunt, and yet he was about to replace Babe Ruth. That was unacceptable. In spring 1962, after Maris had broken the record, the tension reached a boiling point. Someone arranged for Maris to pose for a photograph with Hornsby, probably meant as reconciliation, but Maris refused. He said, "Why should I? He has done nothing but run me down for a year. Why would I smile for a camera with someone who has spent months publicly questioning my worthiness?" Hornsby responded by calling Maris a bush leaguer and a little punk, said Maris could not carry his bat, could not shine his shoes, was not fit to be mentioned in the same sentence as the real legends. This was a manifestation of the terror Maris represented to the establishment. He was rewriting the record books without asking permission, without playing by the unspoken rules of deference for the past. And for legends like Hornsby, who had built their identities on being the toughest guys in the toughest era, Maris was an existential threat. The fact that he refused to bow down to Hornsby was the same refusal he showed pitchers who tried to intimidate him with brushbacks. Maris did not care about your reputation. He did not care if you were a Hall of Famer. He cared about winning the at-bat, and that terrified the people who thought baseball belonged to them. Number 9. The Quiet Assassin Who Never Cracked. Rocky Colavito's perspective on consistency under fire. Rocky Colavito was not just any player. He was a rival power hitter and a contemporary of Roger Maris. Colavito played for Cleveland and was a slugging icon. 6-time All-Star, led the league in home runs. He understood what it took to perform at the highest level when the entire league was gunning for you. And even Colavito expressed a deep respect and genuine fear for what Maris could do under extreme circumstances. What terrified Colavito was not Maris's power or swing, it was his mental fortress. Colavito watched Maris stay remarkably consistent under the most intense media scrutiny in sports history, and he could not understand how any human being could function under that weight without falling apart. In 1961, Maris was not just chasing a record, he was being hunted, hounded in the streets. He could not attend Catholic Mass in peace because reporters tracked him down. He could not eat a meal in public without being mobbed. His hair was literally falling out in clumps because his body was shutting down from stress. The entire world was watching him with every single swing. Every at-bat was analyzed. Every strikeout was used as evidence he did not belong. Every home run was treated with suspicion instead of celebration. And through all that chaos, Maris maintained a disciplined focus that would have broken 99% of professional athletes. Colavito understood this difficulty because he knew how hard it is to stay locked in when everyone is rooting for your failure. When the narrative is already written and you are cast as the villain. When the pressure is not just to perform, but to perform perfectly every time or be destroyed for it. Maris had built what some described as an inviolable wall around his private life. It was survival. He was a family man who actively scorned the bright lights of Manhattan. While other Yankees enjoyed the nightlife and celebrity, Maris preferred quiet reflection, away from the noise, away from people who wanted a piece of him. This was his actual personality. A straightforward Midwestern style that did not bend to meet the expectations of the New York media machine. And that phlegmatic attitude allowed him to process the game without letting external chaos affect his mechanics or approach. His teammates and rivals called him a cocky pro, not cocky in the loud sense. Cocky in the quiet sense that he knew what he was capable of and did not need anyone's approval to do it. For pitchers facing Maris, this mental strength was a unique terror. You could not rattle him. You could not get in his head. You could only throw your best pitch and hope he did not turn it into a souvenir. That unshakable focus is rarer than talent. Talent is everywhere in the majors. But the ability to perform at an elite level while the entire world tries to tear you down, that separated Maris from everyone else. Number 8. The statistical nightmare. Peak dominance that crushed the league average. Let's talk numbers for a moment, but in a way that actually tells you a story instead of just drowning you in data. Between 1960 and 1961, Roger Maris hit 100 home runs. 39 in his first MVP season, 61 in the record-breaking campaign. Now on the surface, that is obviously impressive, but the real terror becomes clear when you put it in context. The American League average for a starting player in those years was about 12 home runs per season. 12. Maris was not just above average, he was hitting nearly 4 times the league average for power. 4 times? That is not a hot streak. That is not luck. That is complete statistical domination over an entire league of professional baseball players. He drove in 253 runs across those 2 seasons, 112 in 1960, 141 in 1961. The league average was about 62 runs batted in per season. Maris led the American League in runs batted in back-to-back years, and it was not even close. He was putting runs on the board at a rate that made every other hitter in the league look ordinary by comparison. His slugging percentage over that 2-year stretch was around .605. The league average was .410. Think about what that gap means in practical terms. It means that when Maris made contact, the ball traveled farther and faster than when almost anyone else in the league made contact. It means pitchers could not get comfortable outs. They could not rely on weak grounders or lazy fly balls. When Maris swung, something violent happened. He won 2 Most Valuable Player awards in those 2 years, not just won them. Unanimously recognized as the best player in baseball. There was no debate, no controversy, just pure acknowledgement that nobody in the American League was doing what Roger Maris was doing. And he appeared in 2 World Series during that span, directly impacting championship outcomes when the stakes were at their absolute highest. This was not a guy who racked up stats in meaningless games and then disappeared when it mattered. This was a player who elevated his game when the lights got brighter. Now here is where the terror really sets in for pitchers. This was not luck. This was not a fluke. This was a sustained 2-year-long takeover of the American League. And what made it truly terrifying was the efficiency. Maris was not just hitting home runs. He was doing it in fewer opportunities than the legends of the past. When he hit his 60th home run, the one that tied Babe Ruth's record, he had done it in 684 plate appearances. Ruth needed 689. Maris was actually more efficient in his pursuit of 60 than Ruth was, despite all the noise and controversy about the longer schedule supposedly giving him an unfair advantage. For opposing pitchers, the numbers told a brutally simple story. If you made a mistake, if you missed your spot by even a few inches, If you left a pitch anywhere near the heart of the plate, it was leaving the park. Not might leave, not could leave, was leaving. And Maris was getting to those 60 mistakes faster and more efficiently than anyone in the history of the game. That is not something you game plan for. That is something you pray does not happen to you on any given night. Number 7. The day the record books needed a new rule. The 1961 pressure cooker. The 1961 season was not just a chase for a record. It was a psychological siege unlike anything professional baseball had ever witnessed. It was a cultural moment that transcended sports and became a referendum on what America valued, who deserved to be called a hero, and whether the modern game could ever live up to the mythology of the past. Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle, known to the world as the M&M Boys, were both on pace to break Babe Ruth's single-season record of 60 home runs. They shared an apartment in Queens with their teammate Bob Serve. Despite what the media desperately tried to sell to the public, framing them as bitter rivals fighting for the same crown, the truth was completely different. They were close friends who genuinely loved being around each other. Mantle later admitted this publicly, but even that friendship could not fully shield either of them from the sheer magnitude of pressure that was building with every game. Let's walk through how that pressure escalated month by month. In April, Maris hit 1 home run. Just one. Mickey Mantle hit 7. The media and the fans were completely focused on Mantle as the primary threat to Ruth's record. Maris was barely a blip on the radar. He was the other guy, the supporting actor in what was supposed to be Mantle's story. Then May happened. Maris exploded for 11 home runs. Mantle had 7. Suddenly, the narrative shifted. Maris was hitting them in bunches now, long balls coming in clusters that made it impossible to ignore what was happening. The press started paying attention. The questions started getting more intense. By June, Maris had 15 home runs in the season. Mantle had 11. Both players were legitimately on pace to break Ruth's record. The pressure went from high to extreme. This was no longer a fun story about the M&M Boys having a great year. This was a serious threat to the most sacred record in sports. And the baseball world started to panic. Then came July. And July is when everything changed. On July 17, 1961, Baseball Commissioner Ford Frick held a press conference. Frick was not just the commissioner. He was a former ghostwriter for Babe Ruth, a personal friend of the Babe, a man who had literally helped craft Ruth's public image and legacy. And Frick was watching Ruth's record come under assault from a player he did not think deserved to touch it. So he issued a ruling. He declared that any record broken after the 154th game of the season would require what he called a distinctive mark. This was the birth of the infamous asterisk concept. The ruling was transparently designed to protect Ruth's legacy. The logic was that Ruth set his record in a 154-game season, so any record set beyond that threshold in the new 162-game schedule was somehow tainted. It was a rule created in the middle of the season specifically to diminish whatever Maris accomplished. The message could not have been clearer. The establishment did not want Roger Maris to be the home run king. This ruling added a profound and varied emotion to the entire chase. It was not just pressure now. It was hostility. Official, institutional hostility from the very top of the sport. For opposing pitchers, the terror became twofold. They were facing a hitter who was in a historic zone, locked in at a level most players never experience in their entire careers. And they were doing it under a global spotlight, where every mistake they made was amplified 1,000 times and would become a permanent part of baseball history. By August, Maris had 11 more home runs. Mantle had 9. Maris passed Mantle for the final time and took sole possession of the chase. The pressure reached maximum levels. Maris was now the target, not the co-star, the target. Every interview was hostile. Every question was a trap. People were not asking if he could do it. They were asking if he should do it, if he had the right to do it, if it would count. Then September came and Mickey Mantle got injured. Mantle finished the month with 1 home run. His body gave out under the strain. Maris hit 9 more in September. He was now pursuing the record completely alone. All of the weight, all of the pressure, all of the hate, it was on his shoulders and his shoulders only. He started losing his hair in clumps. The stress was so severe that his body was physically shutting down. He was hounded everywhere he went. Fans and reporters stalked him in the streets. He could not find peace anywhere, not even in church. And yet he kept showing up, kept taking his at-bats, kept doing his job. The season ended with Maris hitting 61 home runs and Mantle finishing with 54. Together, they had hit 115 home runs as teammates, an all-time record that may never be broken. But the story was never about the combined total. It was about what it cost, what it took mentally and emotionally and physically to get there. And for the pitchers who had to face Roger Maris during that gauntlet, during those final months when the entire world was watching and judging and waiting for him to fail, the terror was in knowing that no matter how much pressure was on him, no matter how much his hair was falling out, or how much the commissioner was stacking the deck against him, he was still going to punish your mistakes. He was still going to make you pay for being in the strike zone. That is a level of mental toughness that is impossible to prepare for. Number 6. The howitzer that made runners think twice. Gold glove defense and the no-fly zone. A huge part of the terror Roger Maris created had nothing to do with his bat. It was his glove, and more specifically, his arm. In 1960, Maris won the Gold Glove Award for his outstanding play in right field. This was not some token honor. This was recognition that Maris was a complete ball player whose defensive style was built on leaping and diving catches and a flat trajectory throwing arm that turned the outfield into a danger zone for base runners. Mickey Mantle, his teammate and closest friend, called Maris's arm a howitzer. That is not hyperbole. Mantle watched base runners freeze when they saw Maris field a ball in the deep right field corner. They knew testing his accuracy was a gamble they would lose. Maris had this way of daring runners to test him. His body language invited the challenge. And when runners took that bait and tried to take an extra base, he would throw them out at home from 300 feet away, with a throw so perfect it looked like a laser beam. This created a defensive no-fly zone that protected the Yankees' lead in close games. Runners could not be aggressive. They had to play it safe. And when you take away aggressive base running, you take away one of the fundamental ways teams manufacture runs. Go back to 1954 when Maris was grinding in the minor leagues with the Keokuk Colonels. He tied a single-season record for putouts by an outfielder. His defensive instincts were elite long before he set foot in Yankee Stadium. What this meant for opponents was simple. Even if you got a hit off Maris at the plate, you were not safe when he was in the field. If you tried to stretch a single into a double or tag up on a fly ball, you were risking an out. This all-around talent meant Maris could beat you in multiple ways. He was not one-dimensional. If he did not demoralize your pitcher with a home run, he would demoralize your base runner by gunning them down. The terror was everywhere Maris was on the field. Number 5. The teammate who did not want to face him. Whitey Ford and the demoralizing pull power. Whitey Ford was Roger Maris's teammate, but he was also the Yankees' ace and one of the craftiest pitchers in baseball history. Ford was a winner who knew every trick in the book and was not above inventing new ones. He admitted to scuffing the ball with his wedding ring to get extra movement. He would do whatever it took to win. Ford had seen it all, faced every type of hitter, dealt with every kind of pressure. And yet Ford famously joked that he was glad he did not have to pitch against Roger Maris. This was not just locker room banter. Ford was serious. He had witnessed firsthand what Maris's pull power did to the American League. He saw the demoralizing effect it had on even the best pitchers. Guys who had been dominating for years would face Maris and suddenly question everything. Ford observed that Maris did not just hit home runs. He hit them with a viciousness that broke the spirit of the opposition. What does that mean? When Maris connected, the ball did not just leave the park quietly. It left with authority. A flat trajectory line drive that rattled the right field seats and made everyone feel the impact. The kind of contact that made a pitcher question whether his best stuff was good enough. For Ford, who prided himself on outthinking hitters and setting them up for failure, facing someone who could punish even well-executed pitches was a nightmare he was happy to avoid. The terror was not about physical danger. It was about the psychological toll of knowing that even when you did everything right, even when you hit your spot and executed perfectly, Maris could still beat you. And if your teammate, a guy who sees you throw every day and knows your repertoire inside and out, is openly relieved he does not have to face you, that tells you everything about the level of dominance you bring to the plate. Number 4. The curveball master who could not hide his hook. Camilo Pascual and the sit-and-drive philosophy. Camilo Pascual had one of the best curveballs in baseball history. A pitch that made professional hitters look foolish. The kind of breaking ball that started at the letters and ended in the dirt. A 12-6 hammer that defied physics. For most hitters, the Pascual curveball was an impossible puzzle. You either committed too early and whiffed, or you took it for a strike. But Maris was not most hitters. Pascual found that Maris was one of the few players who could consistently sit on a breaking ball and drive it with power. What does it mean to sit on a pitch? In the physics of hitting, a curveball works because the hitter commits their weight or hands too early. The pitch looks like a strike, so you start your swing and then it breaks out of the zone. By the time you realize what is happening, you have already swung through it. Maris had the discipline to remain uncommitted until the final millisecond. He could see the spin out of the pitcher's hand. He could track the trajectory, and he could wait just long enough to adjust and still drive it with authority. For Pascual, this made every at-bat a high-stress battle. His primary out pitch, the weapon he relied on for strikeouts, was often the very pitch Maris was waiting to punish. Imagine being a pitcher and knowing your best weapon is bait for the hitter. That is terror. You cannot throw your curveball because he is sitting on it. But you cannot just throw fastballs because then you become predictable. Maris turned the chess match of pitching into a losing proposition. For a curveball ace like Pascual, that was demoralizing. Number 3. The tough guy who could not bully the quiet man. Early win and the failure of intimidation. In the 1950s and 60s, pitchers had a tool mostly gone from the modern game, the brushback pitch. It was standard practice and an accepted part of the culture. If a hitter was crowding the plate or getting too comfortable in the batter's box, you threw one up and in, close to the chin, high and tight. The message was brutally simple: back off or get hurt. This was not considered dirty, this was just baseball. Early Wynn was an absolute legend at this tactic. A tough guy with 300 career wins who never backed down from anyone. He was famous for backing hitters off the plate to reclaim the inside corner as his personal territory. And Early Wynn admitted publicly that Roger Maris was exceptionally difficult to intimidate. Maris was born Roger Eugene Maris in Hibbing, Minnesota, and raised in the rugged environment of North Dakota. His background instilled in him a straightforward Midwestern style that translated into an unshakable presence at the plate. Wynn noted that Maris stood his ground regardless of how close the ball came to his chin. He did not flinch, he did not step back, he did not give the pitcher an inch. What made this even more terrifying for pitchers was that Maris combined this stoicism with lightning-fast hands. So if you tried to move him with an inside fastball, thinking you could reclaim the inner half of the plate, you often watched that same ball fly into the right field seats. Maris had the hand speed to turn on inside heat that most hitters could not touch. For Early Wynn, a pitcher whose entire philosophy was built on intimidation and control, facing someone who refused to be bullied was a nightmare. The traditional hierarchy of the pitcher-batter duel was upended. You could not scare him. You could not move him. You could only throw your best pitch and hope it was good enough. And more often than not, it was not. Number 2, the Yankee killer who lost his best weapon, Frank Larry and the instant punishment. Frank Larry was the Detroit Tigers ace. He was known as the Yankee Killer for his career dominance over New York. This was a guy who had the Yankees number. He knew how to pitch to their lineup. He knew their weaknesses. And yet, when it came to Roger Maris, Larry found himself in a situation that terrified him. Larry admitted that Maris had a unique ability to turn a pitcher's best fastball into a home run in an instant. Think about what that means. Your best pitch, the one you have spent years perfecting, the one you rely on when you need a strikeout, Maris could take that pitch and punish it before you even finished your follow-through. This is different from what we talked about with Jim Bunning or Camilo Pascual. Bunning's terror was that Maris would not chase. Pascual's terror was that Maris could sit on the breaking ball. Larry's terror was raw punishment of quality velocity. He could throw a fastball right where he wanted it, paint the corner, hit his spot, and Maris would still turn it around. For a pitcher of Larry's caliber, this was demoralizing. When your best weapon becomes a liability, what do you have left? The answer is nothing. You are out of options. You are hoping for weak contact. You are praying he hits it right at someone, but you are not in control anymore. Maris took that control away the moment he stepped into the box. And for someone like Frank Larry, who built his reputation on beating the Yankees, losing to Maris was not just a statistical loss, it was a psychological defeat. Number 1, the mechanical nightmare that made deception useless. The compact swing and lightning-fast hands. To understand the deepest level of terror Roger Maris brought to the plate, you have to go back to the foundation, the swing itself. Maris did not have the long, sweeping arc of most power hitters. He had a compact, lightning-fast swing that minimized wasted motion. This was described by his contemporaries as a masterpiece of efficiency and vicious intent. What did that compact swing actually do? It allowed Maris to wait longer on a pitch than almost any other hitter in the American League. In baseball, deception is the pitcher's primary weapon. You throw a fastball to set up the changeup. You show the hitter one speed and then take it away. The whole game is built on making the hitter commit too early. But when a hitter can wait longer, that deception becomes useless. Maris could see the pitch longer. He could recognize the spin earlier. And because his swing was so short and fast, he did not need as much time to get the bat through the zone. This created a massive problem for pitchers. Jim Bunning, a Hall of Fame pitcher known for his analytical approach, identified Maris's plate discipline as his most dangerous attribute. Bunning noted that Maris rarely chased bad balls. He forced pitchers to enter the strike zone even when they were ahead in the count. For someone like Bunning, whose success relied on enticing hitters to expand their zone, Maris represented a high-stress battle because he removed the possibility of the easy out. You could not trick him into chasing a pitch in the dirt. You could not get him to swing at a ball outside. You had to throw a strike. And when you threw that strike, you were throwing it to a man who possessed the pull power to turn any mistake into a souvenir. The discipline was not just patience. It was elite visual acuity. Maris had what his batting coach Wally Moses described as keen eyesight and magnificent coordination. He could recognize spin and trajectory earlier than his peers. So when a pitcher realized that Maris could not be baited, the psychological pressure shifted back to the mound. Now the pitcher was the one under stress. Now the pitcher had to execute perfectly or pay the price. And the price was steep. Maris was a husky 200-pound athlete who used a heavy bat and maintained high velocity through the hitting zone. Because of the physics of kinetic energy, where velocity is squared in the equation, his lightning-fast hands contributed exponentially more force to the ball than a slower, more massive swing would have. This is why his hits were described as flat trajectory line drives that rattled the right field seats. It was not just power, it was violent contact, the kind that made pitchers flinch on the mound. The mechanical foundation of Maris's swing created a situation where pitchers felt trapped. If they threw strikes, he could punish them. If they tried to work around him, he would not chase. If they tried to intimidate him, he would not back down. And if they made the mistake of grooving a fastball thinking they could sneak it past him, he would turn on it with those lightning-fast hands and send it into orbit. This was the #1 terror, the foundational problem that every other fear built on. Maris was not guessing, he was hunting. And once he locked onto a pitch, there was nothing a pitcher could do but watch it leave the yard. So what happened when all these pieces came together? What happened when the mechanical nightmare met the pressure cooker of 1961 and the howitzer arm and the refusal to be intimidated? You got a player who fundamentally changed the way opposing managers had to approach every game. You got a hitter who made Hall of Fame pitchers admit they were terrified to face him. You got Roger Maris. The final chapter of the Maris story is important because it shows that the terror was not just about one season. After the Yankees traded him to the St. Louis Cardinals, a move some saw as the end of his career, Maris proved he was the ultimate winner. In St. Louis, he was no longer asked to hit 60 home runs. He was asked to be the complete ball player he had always been, and he delivered. He helped lead the Cardinals to 2 consecutive National League pennants and the 1967 World Series title. During that 1967 series, he hit .385 with 7 runs batted in. Even in the twilight of his career, he was a high-stress threat on the biggest stage. The St. Louis fans appreciated a player with a straightforward Midwestern style, and Maris found a sense of peace there that had been denied him in New York. But for National League pitchers who had not faced him regularly, the terror was brand new. They discovered what the American League had known for a decade. Roger Maris was a player who could take over a game with his bat, his glove, or his sheer presence in the dugout, who was terrifying not just for his statistics, but for his psychological and technical impenetrability. The pitcher's dread was rooted in his refusal to chase bad balls and his ability to punish best fastballs and elite curveballs. The teammates' awe was based on his all-around talent, his howitzer arm, and his vicious pull power. The historian's anxiety was a generational fear that Maris was upending the natural order of the game's records. And the peers' respect was an acknowledgement of his remarkable consistency under a level of media fire that would have broken most athletes. Roger Maris remains perhaps the most misunderstood superstar in the history of Major League Baseball. While the asterisk and the 1961 chase are the headlines of his biography, the true substance of his legacy lies in the terrifying reality facing him on the diamond. He was a player who combined lightning-fast hands with a disciplined eye, a gold-glove defense with a Midwestern grit that refused to be intimidated by pitchers, fans, or legends. The terror Roger Maris inspired was the terror of the absolute professional, a man who did his job with such efficiency and stoicism that he made the extraordinary look routine. Whether it was Frank Larry losing his best fastball, Camilo Pascual watching his curveball get driven, Early Wynn failing to intimidate him, or Rogers Hornsby losing his grip on the record books, Maris was a force that compelled everyone around him to reach their absolute limit or be demoralized in the attempt. His career spanned 12 seasons and 7 World Series. It is a testament to the fact that while home runs may win games, it is the complete player who defines an era. Roger Maris was that player, truly built different in every sense. And the legends who faced him, the ones who actually had to throw strikes to him or watch him gun down runners from right field, they never forgot the viciousness of the encounter. They never forgot what it felt like to face a hitter who refused to chase, refused to flinch, and refused to be anything less than terrifying. If you enjoyed this deep dive into why Roger Maris was one of the most feared players in baseball history, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment, letting us know which baseball legend you want us to cover next. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.